Happy Thursday evening, everybody. Mahomes and Herbert are about to square off in a few minutes. But as always, we have to talk some 49ers, and I have to answer some of your questions because it's Thursday, 49ers 53-man roster breakdown time. So, without further ado, because I know everybody wants to watch this Thursday night game, and a lot of you will probably watch this on record a little bit later on because you are watching the Thursday night game, but let's get going with this one. The roster is going to pop up on your screen in just a second. As always, a reminder to subscribe right now if you want more of these 49ers videos. I'm making more and more because we got more and more people aboard on the YouTube channel. So it's always nice to have a good audience asking questions. I try to make these as interactive as possible, and I know that the roster breakdowns every week are probably more popular than most of the stuff that we put out there. So I'm back from practice. I'm ready to do it. I'm also ready to talk about my article, and I'm going to mix that in with this week's roster breakdown. I have highlighted the players that, have definite, big health questions or availability questions for this game against the Falcons in red on the 53-man roster. And when I go through the game preview that I'm going to record tomorrow for 49ers Falcons, we'll revisit this because we'll have the final injury report available. But you'll notice I didn't highlight guys like George Kittle in red because I thoroughly believe that George Kittle will be no problem. He'll be playing. Fred Warner, same thing. He wasn't at practice or didn't participate in practice on Wednesday, but he was back out there on Thursday at low ankle sprain. That's going to be okay. Guy like Fred Warner will play. But you're looking at Elijah Mitchell, Maurice Hurst, Dre Greenlaw, Dante Johnson, obviously still tending to the personal matter. And if you're going to ask me about DJ Jones, well, he's working off on the side. He looked nice and spry, even with that listed knee injury. So I think a guy like DJ Jones will go as well. But we're going to take this position by position. And I'm going to answer questions as we go, including the first one here from Tobin Ernst. Trey looks highly inaccurate in your videos. Is that what you're seeing? You know me, I'm very, very careful to contextualize how quarterbacks look on individual throws. And everybody loves to roast quarterbacks for individual throws. And it mainly happens courtesy the anti-Jimmy Garoppolo crowd. They'll come out and they'll say, oh, he threw that one high. How could he possibly do that? He's the most inaccurate quarterback of all time. And now I see a lot of that moving toward Trey Lance as soon as I put up some videos of Trey Lance. By the way, those are on the channel as well. So you could subscribe. A lot of people, I think over 30,000 people watched yesterday's, which was interesting to me. And yes, there was a throw to George Kittle there that he made him really lunge up and try to get in today's video where it was way too high. And I'll say this. Accuracy was one of the question marks of Trey Lance coming out of North Dakota State. But I think it's patently unfair to judge him definitively based on accuracy during warmups, where the 49ers are definitely working on stuff of practice, right? These are practice warmups. It's not only practice, the Allen Iverson practice. These are practice warmups. I do think that there are some mechanical issues that seem to be recurring during warmups. Again, we're not there during 11-on-11s, but during warmups, I think Trey holds the ball a little bit too low before he goes into that throwing hitch. I think that in the NFL, D Ford obviously not playing anymore right now, but there are guys who have made livings, and I'm talking $20 million a year livings, D Ford being one of them, of making strip sacks. And carelessness with the football, holding it a little too low, kind of, flailing it out there, even if it's just for a split second of your throwing motion, that can lead to turnovers in the NFL because there are guys who specialize in strip sacks. So, you saw it against the Bengals. Joe Burrow made a fantastic throw down the near sideline in the game-tying drive where Arden Key came ripping around the edge, and Arden Key must have missed knocking that ball out by an inch. Maybe even less than an inch. And somehow, some way, Joe Burrow got rid of the football. And you have to give Joe Burrow credit there because of how he held the football and how quickly he released the football. And those minute details are so important to the quarterback position at this level. And that, I think, is something that Trey Lance has to get down and is working to get down as he works on that scout team week in and week out. And as he starts to get playing time, probably next year, obviously, that's going to be something that is going to, be analyzed by microscope. People on Twitter, people on YouTube are going to be looking really, really closely at what Trey Lance is doing with the football before the release. And in the NFL, that's a huge deal. So if there's one thing that I have noticed that I think I could fairly critique, it's that ball comes down a little bit low. And it's an elongated motion when that ball sweeps down low. And I think in actual NFL gameplay, there are specialists who are going to be able to knock that ball out. So that's something that I think Trey Lance needs to eliminate mechanically before he starts playing more often, before he actually starts playing, because he hasn't been on the field in several weeks. I think that's one aspect of his game that I'm going to be really, really zeroed in on. As far as the accuracy goes, it's tough to gauge through warmups per se, because 11 on 11s during practice, especially when he's running the scout team, that comes against the defense. That comes against, at least a bit of a pass rush. I know Trey Lance can't get hurt. And in those conditions, you're going to be able to much more firmly gauge Trey Lance's accuracy, because he actually has to perform with a defense present and with actual receivers running routes present. These warm-up drills that you see on these videos, not to discount them too much, I look at them more for the actual mechanics than where the ball ends up, right? I try to disassociate those two things, because Lance could also be working on some stuff mechanically that we're not exactly sure, what exactly is prescribed during the course of these throws. During today's practice, there was a lot of play action. They were raising the arm up and, kind of keeping the fake at arm's length, as you would say, and then they're winding up throwing downfield. So the quarterbacks were working on very specific stuff today. We saw some naked boots. The other day we saw some standard bootlegs. They have their receivers. George Kittle is often one of the receivers positioned at certain points of the field. And of course that they want to throw it accurately to the receiver, but with other stuff being worked on, I don't know if it's the perfectly fair contextual setting to be like, oh my God, Trey Lance is throwing high over and over and over again. Of course, he'd rather be on target, but I want to see him in 11 on 11 action, and we're not allowed into that part of practice. And obviously we haven't seen him in a game 11 on 11 situation in a while. I want to see him in those situations before I make the firm judgment. So I know that's a roundabout answer, but I hope that is fair. And I hope that makes some sense. Okay, let's take a look at the roster. Let's go through this position by position and go through some of the trends that I wrote about today as far as 49ers football in this 2021 season goes. Hope you could see this. Make sure to expand it to the full size of your screen if you can. But obviously, quarterback position starts first, and I'm going to lump this in with the running backs and the receivers and the tight ends, basically all of this, the entire passing apparatus for the 49ers, because one of the most promising trends about this team has happened since week 8. Week 8 is when the 49ers went to Chicago. And to me, it's a big time delineator for this team. It's an inflection point for this team. Prior to week 8, so in weeks 1 through 7, the 49ers offense ranked number 20 in the league as far as expected points added per play. So it was the 20th most efficient offense in the NFL. From week 8 onward, since that Chicago win and including that victory over the Bears, the 49ers have ranked number 6 in EPA per play as a total offensively. So they've surged from number 20 to number 6. And one of the biggest reasons why is because they're distributing the football much more evenly and much more efficiently. Have a look at this. Weeks 1 through 7, Deebo Samuel had 63 targets. Next highest was George Kittle with 28. Now, fast forward since that Chicago game. Highest was George Kittle with 48 targets. Brandon Ayuk tied with him with 48 targets. And Deebo Samuel, instead of being the focal point of this offense and the only focal point, and I don't think it was sustainable when he was getting all the targets and all the catches, he's actually the third receiver right now, in effect, with 30. Now, of course, Deebo's a little bit lower because he's also playing running back right now. But it's the emergence of Brandon Ayuk and the health of George Kittle, which has also been a big deal. He came back the week after Chicago. are huge deals to this offense. There's a reason why people were obsessing so much over when Ayuk would turn the corner, because it was clear through weeks 1 to 7 that the 49ers would need him. And by the way, the 49ers were 2-4 in weeks 1 to 7, and they're 5-2 in weeks 8 to 14. So having the more efficient, balanced offense has tremendously boosted this football team. But this is healthy ball distribution down here. And you could see yards per route run. That is an efficiency stat from Pro Football Focus that measures how often the receiver is getting the football and how often he's producing based on the cumulative total of the routes that he's run. So it's a good efficiency stat to see how a receiver is working in conjunction with, not only a coach's offense, but also in terms of his rapport with any given quarterback. And for the 49ers, that's obviously mostly been Jimmy Garoppolo this year. Blue is good, above average. The darker the blue, the better. And red is below average. And it's really key for any playoff contending offense, in my opinion, especially on a team that's offense driven like the 49ers this year, to have 3 receivers that are plus efficiency, and yards per route run does a good job measuring that. You'll see in weeks 1 to 7, the 49ers only had 2, Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. You had Brandon Ayuk way down, 1.39 yards per route run, which is not good for somebody who was picked in the first round, who the 49ers expected more out of. In fact, he only had 16 targets throughout those first 6 games, 9 catches through 6 games, right? That wasn't going to cut it, 96 receiving yards, while Deebo Samuel had 648. 648 receiving yards compared to 96 for Brandon Ayuk through 6 games. Well, look what's happened here, weeks 8 to 14. Could even zoom in on it a little bit more if this helps you guys see stuff. Brandon Ayuk is 453 receiving yards. Samuel still doing okay. Obviously, he's been used more as a running back, 380. And Kittle has exploded, offensive player of the week, 530. But look at the yards per route run. Kittle leading the league, 3.27. That's ahead of all wideouts, all tight ends, all receivers coming out of the backfield. Kittle is the king over these past, he hasn't played all 7 of the games or so, over the past 6 games for George Kittle. Brandon Ayuk, now he's above average, 2.11 yards per route run and those 453 yards. So that's where the 49ers want Ayuk. It's been a godsend to this offense to have him producing at the way they need him to produce. And obviously Deebo Samuel, in his multifaceted role as a running back and as a wide receiver, is also in the blue. Now, these other guys, they're aux targets, right? Auxiliary targets. Juszczyk, Mitchell. Juwan Jennings coming along. This is not to imply that Juwan Jennings has been bad. In fact, over the past 2 weeks, Jennings has improved to 1.2 yards per route run. So Juwan Jennings is on the rise. 1.3 yards per route run is like league average. I don't know if Jennings is going to fit into the blue for the 49ers because they already have 3 guys producing, but it's just great insurance in case Ayuk goes down or in case Kittle goes down or Samuel goes down. You have a guy in Juwan Jennings who's learning how to shoulder a bigger load. And I think that makes the 49ers feel good about where they are as far as the health and the sustainability of their receiving core. Now, when you talk about sustainability, look at the depth chart here. This concerns me. When Elijah Mitchell is unavailable, and I don't think he's going to play this Sunday, and I'll explain why in a second, but when he's unavailable, the 49ers' best outside zone runner is this guy, Deebo Samuel, right? And if Deebo Samuel has to play a lot of running back, then all of a sudden there's a lot of pressure on Ayuk and Kittle in the receiving room in this graphic. Now, if Kittle or Ayuk goes down and Samuel's still playing running back, you could see where we run into problems unless Juwan Jennings explodes, which is possible. But in general, the 49ers don't want Deebo Samuel to be a runner and a running back at volume. They want him to be a situational running back. They want Elijah Mitchell to handle the volume load at running back, and that frees Deebo Samuel up to be one of the 3 primary options in the pass game, who also throws the defense off balance with his runs. Now, we can't always have nice things. So as of right now, that's something that the 49ers are, in a situation of trying to solve, because Elijah Mitchell has had like 5 or 6 injuries this season. So the key, I think, moving forward for the 49ers is to make sure Elijah Mitchell gets healthy. Currently in the concussion protocol and has the knee injury still. So they want to get him through that. And they have to be very mindful here moving forward that they're going to have 2 games in 5 days. They play Atlanta on Sunday, and then they play Tennessee on Thursday after flying cross country. That's tough for anybody. These Thursday games are brutal on the body. And, every single team has to go through one during the course of a season. And this is how the 49ers are going to have to manage this challenge of these 2 games in 5 days. And I think they're going to do it by resting Elijah Mitchell, even if he passes through concussion protocol, even if he is fully healthy for this game on Sunday. Because fully healthy, I don't think actually is a possibility for him. He has so many different things, the rib, the knee, I think, what wasn't he dealing with, an elbow at one point, and obviously the concussion. He's been beaten up. He's tough. He runs hard. Oh, the finger too. Who knows if that's even fully healed for Elijah Mitchell at this point. He had surgery during the middle of the season. So you got 2 games in 5 days. The better team is Tennessee on Thursday. I think that Elijah Mitchell would be better off resting this Sunday against the Falcons, because you could beat Atlanta with Deebo Samuel in the backfield. But once this schedule starts intensifying, and it really does with the Titans on a Thursday, and then obviously the Rams in Week 18, and then presumably the playoffs, I think if you're the 49ers, you really need a dedicated running back. You really need Elijah Mitchell back there, so that way you could have the trio at the top: George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel catching passes from Jimmy Garoppolo. I dedicated a whole separate video to Jimmy Garoppolo earlier this week. He's been playing very well. 6 of 7 games plus efficiency for Jimmy Garoppolo. And I think the plus efficiency is obviously very, very correlated to the fact that he's now spreading the ball around much more effectively than he did earlier in the season for whatever reason, right? There were injuries early in the season. There was that whole team-wide malaise that the 49ers were going through early in the season. Well, they kicked their ass in the gear in Week 8 against Chicago. And maybe you have to credit Deebo Samuel for that fantastic, 90-yard catch and run against the Bears. Because from that point on, the 49ers have been cooking. Jimmy Garoppolo has been cooking. I mean, there have been exceptions, of course, with this team. They lost to Arizona. I don't think that was Garoppolo's fault. Ayuk and Kittle fumbled in that game. I think a lot more blame goes on the offense for the loss to Seattle, where they couldn't move the ball down the stretch. But again, we grade these things on the aggregate. And I'm telling you, in 6 of 7 games, that pass offense, especially Jimmy Garoppolo, has been on point. And I just showed you why I think that's the case. Any questions about the quarterback or the receiver situation here, or about Elijah Mitchell? Jimmy's top 3 in how many categories? Well, it's complicated. Over the course of the entire season, Garoppolo's generally top 10 and top 5 in some of the efficiency categories, like EPA per play. I think he's number 6 in DVOA. But for all intents and purposes, we shouldn't dumb down this analysis to the whole season. I think it's very clear, and that's why I put this graphic up, that this has been 2 separate 49ers offenses, a week 1 to 7 offense and a week 8 to 14 offense. As soon as the 49ers have gotten balanced on offense, and that's weeks 8 to 14, that's the offense they're dealing with now, Garoppolo's been number 1 in a lot of these efficiency categories. We're talking DVOA, we're talking EPA per play, the QBR's been better. And this is behind a sketchy offensive line, right? He's been taking sacks, but he also hasn't been turning the ball over at an extremely high rate. The Seattle game has been the exception with those 2 turnovers. But outside of that, Garoppolo's played clean football. So he's doing very well, I think, on the aggregate this season. Number 5 is obviously good. But the main reason that he's doing very well in the aggregate is because he's been lights out for the most part in weeks 8 to 14. Of course, with the asterisk being that Seattle game. So the efficiency that Garoppolo has shown since that Chicago game, since that trip back to his hometown, has allowed him to vault up the league rankings for the whole season. But I like to zoom in on weeks 8 to 14 because that's more relevant. That's what the 49ers are dealing with now. They have Kittle. They have Ayuk playing now. Ayuk is confident now. They reworked him masterfully back into the offense, and they have Deebo Samuel doing his thing. So that's how I look at it. I look at it as a week 8 to 14 thing because that's most likely what the 49ers are going to get moving forward. All right. Yes, this is true. Jimmy could actually have better numbers this year than 2019. He's about the same as 2019 when you look at this on an aggregate scale. But again, weeks 8 to 14, Garoppolo has been roughly as efficient as he was in 2017 over that 5-game stretch, which I think is a really big deal. I actually had an article about that not too long ago. Why don't we open that up really, really quickly? This was before, I believe, the either the Seattle game or the Minnesota game. But it was 2017 Jimmy Garoppolo back, because Garoppolo had been more efficient over 5 games than he in 2021 since the Chicago game than he had been in 2017. And you could see the number comparisons. Obviously, it's a little bit outdated now, but over that 5-game stretch, it was like number one in efficiency. It was really remarkable. So the 49ers, here's how I explained it to somebody on Twitter not too long ago. Over the first 6 games this season, Jimmy Garoppolo was worse than he was in 2019. Over the subsequent 7 games this season, Jimmy Garoppolo has been better than he was in 2019 and arguably on par with what he was in 2017. How Jimmy Garoppolo plays over the final 4+ games of this season, which includes the remaining games in the regular season and then the playoffs, how he delivers, which Jimmy Garoppolo you get, will largely determine where the 49ers end up this season. That's the summary. So it's a tale of 3 Garoppolos. The Garoppolo at the start, not great. The Garoppolo after that, really good. And who the Garoppolo moving forward is going to be. That's as simple as I can put it. All right, let's talk 49ers offensive line. Tom Compton, right tackle. He's the man of the hour right now. Partly good, partly bad reasons, okay? This was in my piece today. Here it is. Here's the player card on Tom Compton. Take a look at this. Oops, that's Arden Key. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. Tom Compton, number 2 in the NFL in overall run block grade since he started in week 12. The 49ers were oscillating between Jalen Moore and Tom Compton at right tackle after McGlinchey went down for a while there. They settled on Compton because they like his run blocking. He's graded higher than Trent Williams since week 12. Then look at the pressure percentage allowed for Tom Compton. Number 48 of 53 tackles. He's given up a pressure on 8.5% of passing dropbacks. So one of those numbers is good. It's near the top of the league. One of those numbers is near the bottom of the league. Welcome to the Tom Compton experience. He's a good run blocker, borderline great run blocker. It looks like he's really improved in that facet of his game. And he's just not a good pass protector. He's a bad pass protector, and that's always been the book on Tom Compton. I don't know if you saw that Trent Williams had his movie debut, the premiere of Silverback in San Mateo on Monday night, but they showed all the 49ers offensive linemen who had come out to support Trent Williams, and you got a good look at Tom Compton not wearing pads. And Tom Compton not wearing pads is built almost like a tight end. I mean, this is a light offensive lineman. He's listed as 315. He's not nearly that weight. I would venture to say he's somewhere in the 290s at the most. That's what Kyle Shanahan wants for his outside zone blocking scheme. Dan Brunskill's also a smaller offensive lineman on the right side. But the problem is that Dan Brunskill deals with the same problem as Tom Compton. In fact, only 4 offensive linemen have posted a pressure rate worse than Brunskill's, which is 10.4%, even worse than Compton's this season. So Brunskill's pass protection has been bad this year, unless he's facing Aaron Donald. And then all of a sudden, Daniel Brunskill looks a lot better. But Compton and Brunskill are giving up a ton of pass protection pressure to the point where we all remember when Carlos Dunlap flattened Tom Compton and Jimmy Garoppolo didn't have a chance on that safety in Seattle. There's a trade-off that comes with having the athleticism to make those crazy blocks in space in the run game like Compton did for Deebo Samuel's touchdown, like Brunskill did for Deebo Samuel's big gainer against the Vikings. You have that athleticism to get to the boundary and get 10 yards downfield, 40 yards downfield in Brunskill's case against the Vikings in front of Deebo Samuel. I mean, that's sprinter's athleticism, right, for these big guys. But because of that, you probably have to be a little bit lighter, and it's really tough in obvious pass situations to anchor down and take on those defensive linemen. So that's the catch-22 that the 49ers face, and that's why they want to run at volume, because that means that their right-sided offensive line, which is abnormally light, is not going to have to pass protect at volume against defensive linemen that could steamroll them. Now, they got away with it against Cincinnati. Jimmy Garoppolo had to throw 41 times. That's why Garoppolo's starting because he's the best option for this team this season, obviously. He's more accurate. He's more ready than Trey Lance. But a big reason why Jimmy Garoppolo has so much respect in this 49ers locker room is because of that quick release that's able to beat pass rushers, even though his offensive line specializes in run blocking more than it does pass blocking. So that's the story of the offensive line. The right side is a concern. When I look at this 49ers offensive line on the right side, I say, oh boy, if there's something that's going to derail this offense as this season moves forward and as the postseason begins, it's the offensive line on the right side in obvious pass protecting situations. Now, Alex Mack has helped to some degree because he's so smart. He's the communication center of that offensive line. He's so articulate in the way that he's able to bark out the instructions and make sure that nobody is left exposed, especially on that right side. So it's fitting to talk about Alex Mack during the week that the 49ers returned to play the Falcons, right? Because Mack spent all that time, including a great year, an all-pro year under Kyle Shanahan with the Atlanta Falcons. So it's up to everybody. And I know Trent Williams is a great player, one of the best in the NFL. I know Laken Tomlinson is having a Pro Bowl type year. I know that Alex Mack is still doing it, even at this advanced age. But it's up to these three guys to do a hell of a job to allow the 49ers to dedicate all their help to the right side. And we already saw the 49ers do that this past week with George Kittle trying to help out in pass protection on the right side. And, it's just too bad because every time that George Kittle has to help out in pass protection because the 49ers have issues with Compton and Brunskill, that's one fewer time that George Kittle can run out for a pass pattern. And George Kittle had 13 catches for 151 yards this past week. Another thing about George Kittle, he became the first tight end in NFL history to log consecutive games with at least 150 receiving yards and one touchdown. So you're seeing history with George Kittle. Appreciate it while it lasts, but also remember that because of pass protecting issues on the 49ers offensive line, Kittle is somewhat limited, which is a credit, even more of a credit to the explosion that we've seen from him statistically. He's spending a significant amount of time staying back in pass protection, and he's still setting NFL history as a receiver. And he's still the most efficient receiver in the entire National Football League since week 8 of this season. That's including wideouts. So tip your cap to George Kittle. He's doing some unbelievable stuff. Any questions about the offensive line or the tight ends? Let's see. No questions here. A lot of comments. Yeah, this is a good question. I'm going to go over this one when we hit up the Falcons preview tomorrow, but we could hit it a little bit earlier right now. The Falcons are last in DVOA, but also have 6 wins. What are they doing well? Any matchup concerns for the 49ers? The Falcons are doing a good job winning close games against bad teams. I don't know what else they do particularly well because I've studied them and I don't necessarily see it. I like Kyle Pitts, as a nice young player. Matt Ryan is a smart quarterback, but he's also an old quarterback. I don't think they're great on either line of scrimmage. Grady Jarrett's still there. He's a decent player on the inside. He's given the 49ers trouble before. But this Atlanta team is, as you said, last in DVOA. This Atlanta team is not in a position that, would inspire confidence to beat a good squad, because every good squad that they faced has blown them out, essentially, right? I think almost every good team that they faced has just swamped them. So that's what I see from this Falcons team, and that's why I'm going to die on this hill. The 49ers need to win this game, or else I don't think they're really deserving of a playoff spot. With this much on the line, this late in the season, this is not a week 5 sleeper game. This is a big-time game late in the year against an overmatched team. If you're the 49ers, you have to, you don't have to snuff them out like the Patriots did or like the Cowboys did, because it's hard to do that in the NFL. But I think you do have to win this game in convincing fashion. That's just my opinion on how this one might play out. All right. I'm back. I don't know why. That was weird. That cut out completely on me, but I'm back. But we're fine. We're going to go to defense. I think it cut out at just the right time as I was transitioning from offense to defense. So let me get this roster back up for you guys, and then we'll go from there. Window just completely disappeared. I have no idea what happened. I wonder if we're still going on Twitter. I'm going to check that too really fast. And then we can move on from there. I think it's working. We're still on Twitter. So make sure you follow along right now. I will get the roster up and we'll be off to the races. Get that 70-man depth chart window on the screen. There we go. Sweet. All right. Any more? Right here. This is a good question. Aaron Banks. I promised I'd answer offensive line questions. Aaron Banks is supposedly progressing. Here's another problem not seeing 11 on 11s, and obviously we don't see Aaron Banks play on game day. You really can't tell how he's handling the physicality of the situation. And he's a guy who's had to rework his body a bit, lose some weight, become more rigid in pass protection. That's been the main challenge for him. And Nick Bosa today went out of his way without being asked to say that he thinks that Aaron Banks is coming along. Bosa doesn't rush against Banks all too often because ends don't generally go against guards. But you know that Chris Kacerek likes to mix things up, and the 49ers during practice do try to also do a little bit of that cross-training in one-on-ones with guards working against defensive ends. And Nick Bosa said that he just feels that Aaron Banks is more solid than he used to be and that he's coming along. And I thought that was interesting because Nick Bosa is not a guy that will just gas you up. Nick Bosa doesn't talk a whole lot. He's soft-spoken, but what he says, he means. And with Nick Bosa complimenting Aaron Banks today, that's a good sign for the 49ers. Now, we're getting really late in the season. And I know that the right side of the offensive line is a concern for the 49ers, but the later that we get during this campaign, the more difficult it is to really see the 49ers making a switch, barring an injury at right guard. That's not something that you take lightly for chemistry purposes, inserting Aaron Banks at right guard when you're in the middle of a playoff hunt. That's something I could have seen in week 8 or week 9. But since Banks wasn't ready then, to me, it looks like more, barring injury, more of a 2022 thing. But like I've been saying, you need those 7 quality offensive linemen because stuff happens during an NFL season. So do not rule out the possibility of something happening. You can knock on wood if you're a follower of football. You don't like to see injuries, right? But Mike McGlinchey's already torn his quad. There's a non-zero chance that the 49ers have to dig deeper into their offensive line depth. And in that case, Aaron Banks might be a guy that they have to turn to. All right. I am going to pull that question down. No problem. I saw the thank you. I appreciate that, man. And now we move over to defense, defensive line. 49ers defensive line is coming along. And now I want to show my Arden Key stat it's a group of stats that's really, really impressive. This is in today's article. There's Compton. Here's Arden Key. Take a look at this. Like Jimmy Garoppolo and so many of the 49ers' fortunes, Arden Key has turned it around this year, and he did it starting with that game in Chicago. Weeks 1 to 7, 117 snaps. Weeks 8 to 14, 137 snaps. So a roughly even distribution. But look, at the start of the year, Arden Key was a bottom barrel pass rusher. Only 3 pressures in 117 snaps. That ranked number 111. No sacks. That ranked dead last. And the pass rushing productivity score, it's PFF, that kind of combines the pressures and the hits and the sacks to give a clean score. 2.4, that ranked number 109 of 113. Okay, fast forward. Something happened in Chicago, and I have an idea of what it was. I'll tell you in a bit, though. Look at the difference here, though. 16 pressures versus 3 in this second stretch. That has him ranked number 35. Quite the improvement. He's finishing, though, now 5 sacks. That has him ranked 10th. Arden Key's ranked 10th in sacks since week 8. And that means a pass rushing productivity score of 9.6. That combines the pressures and the sacks. Arden Key is ranked number 12. From number 109 to number 12. What is going on? That's awesome, right? Well, starting in Chicago, Chris Kacerek began putting Arden Key much more frequently in an inside defensive tackle alignment on pass special downs, right? So you expect the pass. You have Arden Key line up inside. He's put on a little bit of weight, I think, since last year where he's a lighter rusher with the Raiders. And he's not a liability in case the offense runs a draw or something, but he's ready to go against those guards who are less limber, less athletic, not as long as Arden Key, who's a tall pass rusher. The guy's 6'5". He's got long arms, probably longer than mine. I'm 6'5" as well, but I don't know. I have a wingspan. I could rush the passer too. I would have been able to had I not been a swimmer. But yeah, nevertheless, Arden Key's a better pass rusher than I am, and he's a much better pass rusher than he was in weeks 1 to 7. He's one of the better situational pass rushers in the league now, which has been a remarkable turnaround for this San Francisco 49ers team. And what that has done is it has allowed their defensive line to blossom. When the 49ers lost to Forrest Buckner, they needed somebody to, reprise an interior pass rushing role. Javon Kinlaw was drafted in the first round because the 49ers thought he might be able to do that, especially after some seasoning. The problem has really been one of availability for Javon Kinlaw. We haven't been able to see if he can develop into that because he hasn't played enough. And he's done for the year, obviously, after playing in only 4 games here in 2021. So the 49ers needed to find more on the inside, especially on pass downs in those NASCAR package situations. And Arden Key has given them that since that game against Chicago. Kentavious Street had his best game rushing the passer this past one against the Cincinnati Bengals. He's another depth piece on the interior. DJ Jones is consistently one of the best players on the football field for the 49ers this year. He's going to make some money once free agency hits. Eric Armstead is now playing inside. I think that's benefiting him. So between Armstead, DJ Jones, and Arden Key coming in on those third downs, part of the NASCAR package for the 49ers, I mean, you could see the improvement here. And if you're going to tip your cap, do it to Chris Kasarik. Chris Kasarik deserves a cap tip. I mean, the guy has developed an impressive amount of defensive linemen. That developmental track record is really nice. Last year it was Kerry Hyder, right, who he'd already worked with before. Well, Kasarik had never worked with Arden Key, so maybe that's why it took a little bit longer. But after a couple of months working under Chris Kasarik, who's the grandmaster of these defensive line coaches, you could see what Arden Key is producing. Now, there's still areas of concern along this 49ers defensive line. Primarily the end spot opposite Nick Bosa. Samson Ebukam had 4 pressures for the 49ers against the Bengals. It was his best game. But the 49ers need more of that from him. They need more of that from Charles Omenihu and more of that from Jordan Willis. Dee Ford is not walking back through that door, at least in 2021, likely not in 2022. That's also something I have another video about. So you got to get more from these other guys because the difference in 2019 when the 49ers had that overpowering pass rush is because they had a complement to Nick Bosa with the speed rush that collapsed the pocket. The 49ers are not nearly as good in this 2021 season as far as the pass rush goes because they don't have that Dee Ford-like presence, just like they weren't nearly as good in 2019 when Dee Ford was hurt. So I'm looking out for those other end positions. Ebukam, Willis, and Menahu, they have to continue delivering. Some really good news for the 49ers is they don't face very good offensive lines moving forward here. They haven't faced good offensive lines the past 2 weeks, right? Even Minnesota, I don't think, is a good pass blocking offensive line. They're better at run blocking. But you go from Minnesota to Seattle, bad offensive line, to Cincinnati, bad offensive line, and you move forward to Atlanta, not a good offensive line. And Tennessee actually hasn't been good at pass protecting either. Obviously, Houston hasn't been good. So it's bad after bad after bad offensive line that the 49ers are facing. They don't really face a plus pass protecting unit until they face the Rams in week 18. So this is a good chance for the defensive line to build its confidence. Linebacker, Dre Greenlaw starting to work a little bit more. I think same deal with Elijah Mitchell and Dre Greenlaw. Even if those guys are available to come back on Sunday, I think you hold them out if you're the 49ers because you have 2 games in 5 days. So get that rest and make sure you have some fresh reinforcements coming in for the Titans because I think Fred Warner is definitely going to be healthy. Azeez Al-Shire, we'll see. I don't have him listed in red here, but he's been day-to-day this week. He's been working up on the side. I should put Azeez in red, so maybe you could see an edit to the oh, that's orange. It's the wrong color. You can see an edit to the spreadsheet here in real time. There we go. We got Azeez Al-Shire in red, so we'll see what happens. But you get Warner back. You hope for depth from Flanagan Fowles, right? You have Marcel Harris in there. Terrell Adams is on the team. You hope that Alshire's back. You're a little sketchy and thin at linebacker right now. But again, the 49ers are a lot better than the Falcons. I think they'll survive. Okay, on to the secondary. Dante Johnson, prayers out to him. Obviously taking care of the situation for his family back home after his mother passed away. Josh Norman played well against the Bengals. The 49ers, mainly this was a situation where Ambry Thomas was getting targeted, so we didn't hear Josh Norman's name too much, and that's going to have to continue to happen. Happy 34th birthday to Josh Norman yesterday, by the way. Shows you the 49ers are dealing with an older cornerback. Maybe we could just say it, an old cornerback. I watched Ambry and Deommodore Lenoir practice this week. Ambry is in the blue non-contact jersey coming out of the concussion protocol. It's going to be really interesting to see how big his immediate jump is, because that first game is always going to be the one where stuff is swimming in your head and stuff is moving the fastest, right? So the first game for Ambry Thomas, not so great. But that second game, let's see if he makes those strides, especially if he has to start this game, because we're not sure where Dante Johnson's going to be. So I do anticipate the 49ers would like to somehow mix Ambry Thomas in to see if he could make those quick strides. So maybe even if Dante Johnson's back after a week of limited practice, it's a bit of a timeshare at that cornerback position. Again, you're playing a number 32 DVOA team in the league. I know it's a huge game, and I know you can't afford to lose this one, but it is a good chance here for the 49ers to keep some of this learning momentum rolling for Ambry Thomas. K'Wan Williams playing great football, nickelback. Tart, oh man, did you guys see Tart this past week when he just hit Joe Mixon, kind of flexed moving in on him? That was cool. And of course, he got Jimmy Ward at that safety position. Have to shout out the special teams this week because I made a whole video talking about how poorly they played the week before. Wishnowski was kicking touchbacks. He's the top punter in the league this year. The punting unit, let's put it this way, is number one right now in DVOA. 49ers have to be happy about that. So as he check in on that part of the roster, the punting's been good. The punt returning hasn't really cost the 49ers. We'll see if Brandon Ayuk could potentially break one. The first punt return of the season in the NFL was housed for kickoff, for a touchdown. Sorry, what am I talking about? Punt return for a kickoff. The first punt return touchdown of the season happened in the Bears game. The Bears did it against the Packers. Just goes to show you how far ahead punt coverage and the directional kicking is of the return game. So the key is to just not screw it up. Just don't drop the ball, right? Which has made Wishnowski valuable because he's causing opponents to drop the ball. The creative angle of the ball coming off of his foot, Australian rules football, and that experience has helped Wishnowski, was a big reason why the Bengals kept on muffing punts against the 49ers. So if you look at it from the 49ers return perspective, as long as Ayuk is not fumbling, they're holding serve. They're looking good. I'm wondering if maybe now that he's getting more and more confident in the receiving game, he might break one free in the punt return game, but that's proven to be hard to do this year. Obviously, the 49ers don't want Robbie Gould missing field goals, but that was the first time in 7 tries that he's missed a potential game winner at the gun for the 49ers. So don't overreact to that one yet. Let's see how Robbie Gould, who's now 39 years old, he also celebrated a birthday fairly recently. Let's see how he bounces back moving forward. I'll tell you what, though, the 49ers hope that they will not need Robbie Gould to deliver a game winner against the Falcons. They certainly hope they win this game by more than 3 points or less than that. So we'll see. All right. Any more questions? I want to go watch some Thursday Night Football. Chiefs and the Chargers. This was fun. I love doing these. I think the most underrated part of the game was our run defense. The Bengals desperately wanted to try to keep it going because our blitzes were effective. They stayed stout, even with Aziz out. I think that's what you wanted to say. Yeah, I think the 49ers did a good job in run defense. They situationally played really well defensively against the Bengals. And one big situation is stopping the run on first and second down. They ran with Mixon, Cincinnati did, in overtime at the end of that drive on both first and second down. And the 49ers stopped them enough to force a 3rd and 3, which allowed K'Wan to blitz and Nick Bosa to get that sack. So I think you have a great point. Is the reduction of penalties on the DBs because they're playing better, the D-line playing better, or because they're being protected by Ryans? I mean, it's one of those all the above questions. It's a team sport, right? But I think the pass rush has gotten better. That's clear. We discussed that in this video. The technique in the secondary has gotten better. The 49ers focused on that. And Ryans has gotten better. Ryans has gotten better schematically. I mean, it's the K'Wan Williams blitz in overtime to set up Nick Bosa on the single team is a great example. But he's also trusted his defensive backs. There's a lot of cover 2 man in that game against the Bengals. And, Ambry Thomas had his share of flubs. It wasn't a great game, but I thought he was going to get beaten over the top more than twice. He only got beaten over the top twice. I know that's not a high bar, but it was his first game, and there actually were some positives to take from it. So we'll see how he does moving forward. Hyder hasn't had a great year with Seattle. Can't help but wonder if we would have done better than Ebicom and SF line this year. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Another thing, though, is the 49ers really want that speed rusher to complement Bosa. Hyder was kind of a one-man show last year. Versatile guy, but the 49ers didn't have Bosa. When you're talking about a cohesive pass rush as a unit and you're piecing all the guys together, you got Bosa on one side and you want to bring that speed off the other edge. Amenahu, I mean, he might not be a speed rusher, but he's got size. I'm excited to see how he does. All right, guys, thanks a lot. This was fun. Time to go enjoy your Thursday. Hope that you tune in for the Falcons preview tomorrow. 49ers Falcons on Sunday. More content coming before then. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to check out this article that's on the right. All kinds of stuff. We got the charts and we've got the player breakdowns. It's all there for you. Everybody take care.